Major funding for Marcia Adams Heartland Cooking is provided by Maple Leaf Farms, a symbol for ducklings and frozen entrees, chef quality you can count on. By Souder Woodworking, America's furniture craftsman. With more than 50 years' experience, Souder provides ready-to-assemble furniture for today's home and office. By Marilat Industries, America's cabinet maker, committed to quality in a variety of kitchen and bath cabinetry styles.
Hello, and welcome to Heartland Cooking. Did you know that the Midwest boasts almost 150 wineries and more than 17,000 acres of vineyard land? Michigan, Missouri, and Ohio are all large producers of wine, and the other Midwestern states are increasing their acreage all the time. Today, our recipes are all made with wine, and as we cook, I hope to share some of the interesting wine lore about the Midwest with you. But let's begin our first recipe. It's absolutely wonderful. It's grilled chicken with basil and garlic. And to begin with, you're going to need 4 whole chicken breasts, which have been boned and halved with the skin left on. Now, you might want to order those at the butcher because more boneless chicken breasts are coming with the skin off these days. But to make this recipe work, you have to leave the skin on, and you'll see why. Now, 4 breasts will make 8 servings or 8 portions, unless you're extremely hungry. Then, the next step is to prepare 2 cloves of garlic and slice them up well, thinly, because they're going to have to cook on the grill, and 1/2 cup of large fresh basil leaves, and have those all prepared and set aside. Don't use dried basil for this recipe. It just simply isn't as good, and I don't want you to waste your time doing a mediocre tasting recipe. Now we're going to place 2 slices of garlic, this real thinly sliced garlic, under the skin of each one of these halves. Now notice the way this forms a pocket, and this makes really a very good stuffing sort of situation. And I also have a recipe for ricotta and spinach that I put in these little pockets. See, now tuck that in, and there you have really just a nice little pocket of chicken with the garlic slices and with the basil leaves. And we'll finish up the other one here. And when they're grilled, they're very pretty too. Tuck that under. Then put these in a flat glass casserole like this. And it's about a 3-quart, I would say, and set that aside. And now we're going to prepare a marinade. And the marinade, of course, as you might guess, is made with wine. Not a whole lot today. We start with 1/4 cup of white. And if you really did not want to use wine, you could substitute a chicken stock. And then to that, we're going to add 1/4 cup of lemon juice. And that acid is going to continue tenderizing the chicken breast. And 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper, and 1 very finely minced garlic clove. Mix that up. And then we're going to just pour that over the chicken and cover this tightly and refrigerate it overnight. In fact, you could refrigerate it a couple of days if you wanted to, because you can't hurt chicken. And now we're going to make the sauce. I want you to do all of these things before you start broiling. And to make the sauce, we're going to use 1 whole garlic head. And I don't mean a clove, I mean a head. And separate it into the cloves. You might have, 15 or 20. Do not be overwhelmed. And don't peel them. This is what's even nicer. You want to simmer all of these unpeeled cloves in 1 cup of chicken stock. And you could add a splash of wine if you want to. And cover this little pan with a lid and simmer it for about 30 minutes and then cool it slightly. And when you're finished, you see these are going to be quite soft and the pulp is going to come out. And that skin has added extra flavor. Not to mention it saved you a great deal of time by not peeling them. Now we're going to transfer this to the food processor bowl, which has been fitted with a steel blade, and we're going to puree it. And again, you could make this in advance. I try to make as many things as I can in advance when I'm entertaining because you can always count on a crisis at the last minute. I guess that's life. There's an old Yiddish saying that life happens to you when you're busy getting ready to do something else, and I always try to remember that when I'm getting ready to entertain. Now, this is pureed, and we're going to then strain it to get out those skins. And with the back of a spoon, sort of force through all the good puree. There. And let's see if I have anything. No, I don't. This is nice and empty. And we're going to then put this sauce that we've just pureed, the garlic and the chicken stock, back into the saucepan. And then we're going to add a couple more of ingredients. We're going to add 2 tablespoons of very finely minced, chopped, fresh basil, right out of the garden, and 2 tablespoons of whipping cream. And that is our final sauce to pour over the grilled chicken. Now put this aside on a warm burner until the grilled chicken is ready to serve. And here is our chicken. Oh my, it's going to be so good. First of all, fire up your grill. And if you're doing it outside, and I feel very strongly that you ought to preheat your grill at least 15 minutes. Now, I have never convinced my husband of this, and if I can't teach my husband, I don't know how I can teach you. But nevertheless, that is how I feel. You ought to preheat your outside grill for about 15 minutes. Now, if you are using an inside grill, follow your manufacturer's instructions. If you're doing it outside, grill it about 3 inches from the heat, about 7 to 10 minutes on each side. Now, I would also tell you, if you're grilling outside, a lot of the time that, I shouldn't say that, you should take into consideration something like this. The wind is blowing, it's a cold day, some people even charcoal grill outside during the winter. That's going to have a whole lot to do with the amount of time you do this chicken. But ordinarily speaking, 7 to 10 minutes on a side. Isn't this pretty? Look at this. And it's really so easy to do, as you can see. One warning, chicken must be well done. There should be no pinkish flesh and no pinkish juices running out of this when you're finished. Now transfer the breast to a warm serving platter, and we have some that are already finished. Aren't these beautiful? Just look at them. We've got them garnished up with grapes because we used wine. Isn't that a pretty thing? And now we're going to put some of this heated sauce over the top. Reheat it if it's necessary, and then put about a tablespoon of sauce on each breast, and put some of that fresh basil on it too, because you want that sudden explosion of flavor. And there we have our final dish. This is a very unusual grilled chicken zapped with a heady amount of garlic. And the sauce does explode with flavor, but don't be afraid of it. It isn't overwhelming with garlic. Since you've cooked it, it's perfectly all right. I must confess that I have an inordinate fondness for cold soups, and I'm going to show you how to make an unusually colorful one. It's very different, and in keeping with our theme today, it certainly includes wine among the ingredients. This recipe is a sweet potato bisque with sherry, and it's just most unusual. It's a very good recipe for entertaining because you can make it 2 or 3 days in advance and keep it refrigerated. Now, in a small saucepan, I've sauteed together 2 tablespoons of butter and 1 small chopped onion and a half a cup of chopped celery until it's soft. If it browns a little bit, that's all right, but it's better if it's just nice and golden. This will take about 4 to 5 minutes. Then I've cooked together 1 1/4 pounds of fresh sweet potatoes. Don't use canned ones. These have been peeled and sliced, and then we have cooked them in 2 cups of beef stock. And I hope it's homemade beef stock, but you could cheat a little and buy the canned. Now cover these, the sweet potatoes and the beef stock, cover and cook until the potatoes are very tender, like this, you see? About 25 minutes, and then cool them slightly. Then I want you to combine these vegetables together and put them in a food processor and puree them until they're very, very smooth. And it looks like this at that stage. See? Almost looks like a pumpkin pie filling. If you didn't have the vegetables in there, you could indeed use a pumpkin mixture, a sweet potato mixture like this for pie. Then I want you to stir in some other things. A salt to taste, a half a teaspoon of white pepper, and a half a teaspoon of cumin. That cumin is an unexpected lilt and quite delicious. And then 1 cup of whipping cream and a dash of red pepper sauce. This will just give it an undertone of piquancy there that I like in a soup. And then we're going to use 2 tablespoons of dry sherry and maybe 1 for the pot. There, won't hurt. Now, whiz this until it's all combined. Now, you may need to add additional milk to get the desired consistency that you want. Now, you see, I think this is just a little stiff, so I'm going to add a little more milk and thin that down. But this will vary on the potatoes you've used and the amount of rainfall you had that year. All those funny inconsistencies that drive cooks insane, but keep them on the trail of a really good recipe. Now chill this until it's very cold, and then serve it in punch cups or in bowls, garnished with chives or pumpkin seeds. It's really a version of vichyssoise, only it's made with sweet potatoes, and we have delicately nuanced it with sherry. It's a lovely, lovely soup for entertaining. Keep it in mind. Do you remember that sweet potato that we were going to attempt to grow? Well, let me show it to you. We have just nourished the sweet potato and taken very good care of it and talked to it like you're supposed to do with plants. It's been in the kitchen window, and it's growing roots, and it's sprouted leaves, and it's on its way. Not overwhelmingly, but it's on its way. Incidentally, the sweet potato is related to the morning glory, and I think you can see that when you look at the leaves. And when this plant gets bigger, it will be quite a sprawling vine. That is, it will be a sprawling vine if it does what it's supposed to do. We may put spider plants out of style. Now that we have exhausted sweet potato agriculture, let's get back to wine and grapes. First, a bit of history. By 1859, Ohio was the premium wine state, producing 1/3 of the national total. That's impressive. Twice as much as California, which was still considered a wilderness at that time. The center of the wine industry was around Cincinnati and inspired Longfellow to write the poem, Ode to Catawba Wine. The first domestic champagne was actually made in 19th century Cincinnati from Catawba grapes. And in Ohio, you'll find the most scenic wine tours you can imagine amid the Lake Erie Islands. We visited one of them, Lonz Winery on Middle Bass Island. They're noted for their cream sherry, which is served at the White House, as well as their champagne.
Walking along the shore of Middle Bass Island, looking across to Perry's Monument, which, incidentally, celebrates Commodore Perry's defeating the British for the control of Lake Erie, is a very pleasant way to spend an afternoon. People boat in all summer long to enjoy the ambiance as well as the wine from the historic Lonz Winery. The winery itself is a regional landmark, and you can see why. I find it reassuring to know that every year the reputation of Lake Erie wines is on the upsweep, and rightfully so. One reason is because this region has the best grape-growing climate in the eastern and Midwestern states. The gentleman I'm walking with is Rob Boaz, the general manager of Lonz. He gave us a tour of the islands and the winery. This room, with its original wine barrels, has a lot of atmosphere.
Part of the fun of coming to the winery in Lake Erie is to come to this reproduction of a German castle and sit on the porch and drink wine and look out over the lake and enjoy the hand-painted murals on the wall that I remember from my salad days. There are many kinds of grapes growing on these island vineyards and several kinds of wine, as you can see, though today we are sort of specifically zeroing in on the champagne. And Rob, I know you're very proud of this product, and I wish you would tell me a little bit about the history of the island first, and then show me how to properly open a bottle of it, champagne.
Well, I'll do my best to properly open. Sometimes they do go amiss. This winery was built in 1865, dug out by hand. This castle-like structure that we're sitting on was built in 1934, and George Lonz did travel to Europe, got his ideas from castle-like structures in Germany, came back, and he built this magnificent winery with an observatory on the top that he had a telescope in, and he viewed the islands and the stars from there.
Ah, lucky man.
And he sipped Ile de Fleur champagne. Let's see if we can open some up.
Now the name, Ile de Fleur, what's the history of that?
Well, in the late 1600s, the early French explorers came to the island, saw a great abundance of floral displays.
Like wildflowers, I assume.
Wildflowers at that time. And the island was coined Island of Flowers, or Ile de Fleur. And we've continued in that tradition by producing the Ile de Fleur champagne. Now, to open the champagne bottle, although it's festive to let it pop, the best way is to ease out the cork and just hear a little hiss. That way you save all the carbonation. You hold on to the cork and you twist the bottle.
Hold on to the cork, but just twist the bottle.
Twist the bottle.
Quite opposite what you
Then you'll
think.
hear just a hiss.
Right, I'm listening for that hiss.
And there you go.
And there's the carbonation coming out. Very good. Let's pour some. Now, what's the proper way to pour? Just like that.
Just like this.
And right to the top. Perfect. I think you've had some practice.
A little bit.
On the neighboring North Bass Island, there are over 200 acres of grapes, which is approximately 270,000 vines. That's a big responsibility for anybody. The vineyards are carefully watched over by Dale Burris, the head viticulturalist. We walked down the rows, and he showed us these little berries, and they cover every vine. They look like elderberries at this stage. These pictures were taken May 30th, and in about 2 weeks, they will actually blossom like flowers. I wish we could have seen that. And after blooming, the grapes develop. The birds hover nearby in anticipation, waiting for those grapes to mature. I can hardly blame them. There are 20 different varieties under cultivation on the island, and one of them is the Catawba grape that Longfellow wrote about. He described the wine as dulcet, delicious, and dreamy, and the birds would certainly agree with him.
You're truly in another world when you're on the islands. Certainly, that vineyard has to be one of the prettiest places in the Midwest, and I just was enchanted by the bird life. I was ready to do a whole hour show on the birds on the islands in Lake Erie. Our final recipe using wine is blackberry jam cake with sherry sauce. It's a very, very old recipe, and it comes to us from Hermann, Missouri. The Germans settling in Hermann brought with them their love and knowledge of wine from their homeland. And between 1850 and 1900, they developed a very successful wine industry, making Missouri the nation's second largest producer of wine and the third largest supplier of wine in the world at that time. A lot of it went to Europe. Then came Prohibition, and that was the end of the wine for a while for everyone. Now, let's get started on the recipe. In a large mixer bowl, I've combined 1/2 cup of softened butter and 2/3 cup of sugar, and it's been beaten until it's light and fluffy. I like to give that about 3 minutes. And then we're going to add 2/3 cup of blackberry jam and 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg. Now, I'm not going to inquire whether your blackberry jam is homemade or not. This is 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg, and then blend that in. Then, in the bowl here, I want you to dissolve a tablespoon of baking soda, because this is our leavening. As I told you, this was a very, very old recipe before baking powder was used, and a tablespoon of cold water, and mix that together. And then we're going to add something else that's going to further activate the leavening. We're going to add 2 tablespoons of sour cream and mix that together, just briefly, because the acid in the sour cream will work with the soda. Then add 2 beaten eggs here. And I told you, did I not, that that was 1/2 teaspoon of soda? I want to get all these proportions right. 1/2 teaspoon of soda. Add your 2 beaten eggs and combine that. Then stir this or beat it very quickly into the jam mixture. Of course, this recipe would have been designed before electricity, so you're going to mix this very, very quickly when you are doing it in the mixer, but you could do it by hand. But just blend it, not a lot. Then we're going to add 1 cup of all-purpose flour and beat it now until it is indeed thoroughly mixed. We could throw in a speck of salt here, I think, too. This batter is so beautiful, it's purple. Isn't that lovely? I'm going to pull up the beater so you can see it. Isn't that gorgeous? Now we're going to add raisins that have been, 2/3 cup of raisins that have been mixed with 1 tablespoon of flour. Beat those in. Now, theoretically, by adding the flour to the raisins, these raisins are not supposed to fall to the bottom of the pan during baking. I cannot guarantee that. That's, as I say, theoretical. Now, you can put this into a 9-inch round pan or a 9-inch square pan, and I happen to particularly like the round pans because I like triangular pieces. Now, I thought it was so interesting in Hermann, when the story about Hermann, Missouri, when Prohibition came, those pragmatic Germans did this. They turned their wine caves into caves for growing commercial mushrooms, and they survived the period of Prohibition very, very well. Now let's stir this in a little bit. I see that the mixer didn't do it thoroughly enough. There is sometimes no substitute for good old hand mixing. There we are. Now we're going, see how pretty that is, as I mentioned to you, this beautiful blackberry jam cake? I remember picking picking blackberries for jam as a girl, and I had to wear long stockings on my hands because they have very brambly bushes. And we tied a pail around ourselves and put the bail of the pail underneath our belt and dropped the berries in. Oh, that was fun. Looking at it now, it wasn't fun then, it's fun now. The memories of it all. Now bake this at 350 degrees for 30 to 40 minutes until the top springs back when you touch it with your fingers. That is a very good test. You just hit the top of the baked cake, and if it springs back up, you know that it's done in the middle. Now while the cake is baking, I want to prepare a delicious sauce that accompanies it. First of all, you're going to cream a lot of things together in a saucepan. So you're saving a dish with this. And here we have half a cup of butter. And we're going to add 1 egg and 1 cup of sugar and a little pinch of salt. And then we're going to beat that together. This is really so simple and it's so good. Then cook this over medium heat until about 3 to 4 minutes, or maybe even 5. The mixture will be thick. Now, then I want you to add these final remaining ingredients: 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla, and just you can estimate it. That isn't the main flavor here. And then we're going to add 1/2 cup of cream sherry. And of course the cream sherry is a sweeter sherry, and this is a very appropriate to use for this sweet cake. Incidentally, this is also delicious on pound cake, and it's also delicious on fruit cake at Christmas time. It really dresses it up. Now you want to cook this for about 3 minutes longer, and it thickens up beautifully. And if the sauce appears to be too thick, you can always add a little more sherry. Now, this is what it looks like when it's all finished. Isn't this just simply beautiful? Look at it. Just a wonderful, wonderful buttery sauce. Now come over here and look at the finished cake. This is a very tender cake, and since it's a round one, we're going to cut it into wedges. But if it were square, of course, you'd put it into squares. Isn't it pretty? We're serving it on a purple charger to pick up the purple color of the cake, and we've garnished it with blue chicory blooms that are wild. Now, I want you to serve it with this wonderful buttery sherry sauce that we made earlier, and I'm just going to put a little bit on the side right here. And maybe I'm going to put a lot on the side. This is so irresistibly good. I don't know of anyone who'd say no to it. And then we'll just have a wonderful, wonderful dessert and serve that with a cup of hot coffee. It's really easy for me to get excited about the Midwestern wines because I'm able to get them here and I drink them all the time, and I know the extent of their variety and quality. They're truly top-notch, and I hope you'll look for them in your shops at home. Now, the few recipes we did today hardly show what potential wines have in cookery. Though we did a good job, didn't we? Had a good start. We began with this lovely grilled chicken with basil and garlic and marinated in wine. It's really a taste sensation. Then we did the sweet potato bisque with sherry, and it's a knockout first course, and your guests will be delighted with it. And finally, the charmingly old-fashioned blackberry jam cake, a nostalgic reminder of the past, but still very chic with this Victorian sherry sauce. With the emphasis that's always been placed on wine quality in the United States, it's no wonder that we would also attach importance to the serving of wine in its containers. The examples we have today are antique Waterford crystal pieces. The original factory was established at Waterford, Ireland in 1729, and the early glass made before 1830 was darker than the brilliantly clear glass of later production. Now, the factory closed in 1852, and it didn't reopen for 100 years, rather like the Sleeping Beauty. Different wines are served in different glasses, and we have examples first of a champagne flute, a red wine glass, and then a white wine glass. Notice the difference in size here. Certainly the red wine glass, you can see this, is much deeper, so the more intense bouquet of the red wine can be fully appreciated. And this is a captain's decanter. The broad bottom kept the bottle erect on the rolling seas, hence the name captain's decanter. The sailors themselves would not have had anything so elegant. And these are bottle tickets, and they're reproductions from Williamsburg. They're often incorrectly called wine labels. The proper term, and we must be that, is really bottle tickets, and they're hung on bottles to identify what's inside. Since we discussed Ohio wines today, it was a lovely coincidence to find this Ohio coverlet. Isn't it good looking? It's a double weave with a reversible pattern, one side light, one side dark. And look at the way it's signed. And the word wove is written in. That's probably the way the weaver spoke. Only 5 of these are known to have been woven. So indeed, this is not only a lovely thing, but a rare one too. Until next time, as a goot, eat good.
Major funding for Marcia Adams Heartland Cooking is provided by Maple Leaf Farms, a symbol for ducklings and frozen entrees. Chef quality you can count on. By Souder Woodworking, producers of ready-to-assemble furniture for the home and office. America's furniture craftsmen with more than a half-century of experience. By Marilat Industries, America's cabinet maker, committed to quality in a variety of kitchen and bath cabinetry styles.